Okay, hi. So this is my May reading wrap-up part 2, everything I did not read for the Asian Readathon. If you wanted to watch that one, I will link it below. I thought it would be a bit too long to put together because I did read quite a few books in May, and my wrap-ups are always very long, so hopefully I will be snippy, and we are going to get started. We are going to go in chronological order again from when it was published, and we're going to start with a book that I read for May of the Moderns. So that is Cards on the Table by Agatha Christie. This is my third Agatha Christie read. I've read And Then There Were None, which I quite enjoyed, and then I read Death on the Nile, which I did not, and was thinking maybe I wasn't going to keep reading her, but then I chose to listen to the audiobook of Cards on the Table, and I liked it quite a bit. I don't have too much to say. I thought it was just a fun Christie novel. I liked the psychoanalysis of all of the characters by means of how they play cards. I always like the red herrings that she puts in, and it's just, I'm never there to try to solve the mystery. I'm just ready for her to surprise me with who it was. And that was published in 1936, and then published in 1973, a middle grade classic, I would say. I read How to Eat Fried Worms. I had not read this before, and it was just fine. I mean, it's just a kid that bets the other kid, I bet you can't eat 10 or 15 or however many worms, and it slowly, day by day, it slowly racks up in intensity, and the parents get involved, but it's really just focused around them eating fried worms, and none of the kids really have too much personality that comes on the page, and then they're doing wild things, and the parents are just cool, have fun, yeah, you should do that because you bet him, and I'm no parent would do that, but I'm sure it's fun for kids when they read it, so I get why it's a classic. Also, I'm sure every child has considered eating a worm, so there's probably some satisfaction in reading this and hearing how they eat all the worms differently. This is a funny one. So this is a story behind it. So this was published in 1995. Myself and my best friend, when we were growing up, I went to her house one time, and she had this book called Sassafras. And we were not at picture book reading age. We were definitely in elementary school, and I don't know why, but we thought this book was so funny. We kept rereading it. We were crying, laughing so hard. This book entertained us for hours. And then, we would just both comment on Sassafras every once in a while. And then it got lost to time, and I remember us both trying to figure out what the heck this book was, and we knew it was Sassafras, but find it, and I was going through my mom's books. It definitely wasn't mine when we were a child. She was the one that owned it. It was at her house. I'm fairly certain. So then I was going through some books my mom was getting rid of when I was in town, and I found this in it, and I was where did this come from? And my mom didn't know, and so I had to reread it for old time's sake, and it is not as funny as 8-year-old me thought it was, but it's it has sentimental value, so I brought it home and thought it was amusing. Okay, next one was published in 2016. I have already unhauled it to my used bookstore. It is A Taste of Honey. So this is a high fantasy novella. I believe it's published by Tor, and it kind of covers the entirety of someone's life. It backs and forths between this moment in time where these two men meet. One of them is a more princely kind of character, lives in the castle, has connections to higher ranking individuals, and the other one is a soldier from a different place who is stationed there, and 10 days before the guy stationed there has to leave, they start up this love affair, and it is not allowed in this place, but that type, like a queer relationship is allowed where the soldier is from, and it bounces between that and the future where this man marries the man that stays and marries and has kids and all of that. That's not really spoiling anything. It was okay. I enjoyed it enough. It was very short, but it has a very well-known trope that people hate, that you don't find out is happening until the end. And I can't tell you what it is because it will give it away, but I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, that was my thought process. But it didn't really ruin the experience for me. If it had been like a 600-page book and I got to the end and that was the ending, I would have been very annoyed. But it just being a short novella, it didn't really change the experience of the book that much. So this is, while it's not an actual romance, it is very focused on a romance in a fantasy setting. So it's like a a romantic fantasy as opposed to a fantasy romance, if that makes sense. Then the next one, published in 2019, is another Tor novella, and that is The Haunting of Tram Car 15. I had tried to read this once before and DNF'd it very quickly, and it is like maybe a 3.5-hour audiobook, and it took me like 4 days to read this. I think that for fantasy, there's something about fantasy worlds that I don't like in a novella. I don't like the intensive world building, like very, very quick, where you're just not getting some of the world. Or you're just missing things because they don't have enough time to info dump and keep you interested. So this is a mystery that takes place in historic Cairo that has fantastical elements. It's a lot of genre blends, which isn't necessarily the part that I dislike, and I actually think that's really interesting. Someone who can like bend so many genres together. We're doing historical fiction, but it's a fantastical history, like an alternate history, I guess, and then we're overlaying it with a mystery element, which mysteries, although I started with Cards on the Table and enjoyed that, mysteries aren't my favorite, especially when I didn't know it was a mystery going in. So there is obviously The Haunting of Tram Car 15, that this man and his, not intern, but he's a new folk on the team working for the government, joins in on. And they're trying to uncover this, but there are a lot of characters introduced in a short span of time. And I don't know if it's the writing, because I also read Ring Shot by this author, but there's something that's like very immersive about the world, but I can never truly fully feel immersed in the writing, and I don't know if it's because the stories are short or the writing itself is a hindrance to me, but I find myself to be in the minority with that. So if you are looking for an interesting genre blend, and you do like mysteries, I think that this would be a good novella to read. Okay, and then I read a short story collection that was published in 2020. It is Anoka by Shane Hawk. I read this. It was the Indigenous Reading Circle's book of the month, but I missed the day where they all did the live show and talked about it. This is a horror short story collection. For me, it was fine. The author was kind of hitting on different tropes. So it was, Anoka is like, I think it's an actual place, maybe in Minnesota, and it takes place in an indigenous community, but not the one that the author is actually from and associated with. So it's not technically an Own Voices narrative if you're looking at it through that context. And it hit just like the classic horror elements. There was like body horror. There was like, I think, a werewolf story. There were different types of stories within it. I think it was only 6. It was rather short. But I personally just found the writing a bit lacking, that for it to give like the true punch of like intrigue and make it me feel like some sort of scared way. I don't normally get scared while reading, but I still didn't feel like it was immersive enough to like check the horror element of like, oh yeah, that was actually frightening. Although there were some frightening stories in it. One I can think of is like the guy with his child, like it was off-putting. He had a lot of like classics of horror genre. So if you kind of maybe if you don't know what kind of horror you like, and you're trying to kind of pinpoint it or pinpoint types that you don't like, you could read this short story collection, and it kind of has a good enough array that you could be like, okay, it's not the monsters, or I don't like body horror, or I don't like horror involving children, and it might point you in the right direction of what kind of horror, I keep saying that, you do enjoy. Next, I read Boy Parts by Eliza Clark. So this I strangely enjoyed. So it really gives off my year of rest and relaxation vibes. So you have a protagonist that has something happen in her dead-end job, but she's also a photographer, and she doesn't have work for a while. So you kind of follow her through this period of time as she unravels, and you learn about her history and some like gruesome things that she does and has done. So she takes provocative pictures of men, and she will come up to men and that she likes the look of and offer them no money, just offer to take their photo and see if they follow up with her on that. She is supposed to be very beautiful. This has been compared to American Psycho, which I think that the protagonist is inspired by that protagonist. Like, it's kind of a feminine version of him, but not as gruesome. Like, the book is not... I was truly traumatized after reading American Psycho. This did not traumatize me. It wasn't as disgusting, but there were gross things that happened. And you kind of just follow her as she falls into like some sort of mental health crisis, psychosis. I am not sure. She is not a reliable narrator. She has I would consider an eating disorder that is on the page, so keep that in mind. And then I don't know where this author is from, somewhere in the UK, and it is full of slang that I had no idea what she was talking about. Like, there were so many turns of phrase where I'm like, what does that mean? So I feel like for someone who is from there, that might be fun, but it didn't detract from the reading experience for me at all. I was just like, I kept being like, what is she on about? Like, what does that even mean? But I did really enjoy this book quite a bit more than I thought I would. And then I read A Dowry of Blood. This was published in 2021, and it is like a romantic kind of vampire book, but it's more about domestic violence than about love. So your protagonist, she gets turned into a vampire by this very old vampire who then takes her in and begins to, it's just an abusive relationship. He slowly takes away her control over her life. He doesn't let her out. He doesn't let her do things. He is much more physically powerful. He is a much older being. And then he brings in new people through time and into the relationship. There's a lot of sex. There's vampires. It's supposed to take place in old times, but I question how accurate a lot of that was, and because like the language wasn't accurate to how someone would speak in that time, and it was like the writing was not that good. So I've seen a lot of hype for this book, and I was disappointed. My friend gave it to me telling me like it wasn't that good, so I wasn't expecting a lot, but it is very hyped on different parts of BookTube, and I found it very much lacking, and would probably not recommend. It's also not a love story at all, so if anyone says that, it's a lie. And we will end on a strong note, and that is Of Women in Salt by Gabriela Garcia. This is kind of like an intergenerational look at a Cuban-American family going back to, when does it open up? The 1800s? Yeah, going back to 1866 Cuba. So it's showing different generations of that family and like their connections, and it kind of bounces between the 1866 part really only happens at the beginning to give you context, and then it goes into time with her children and her grandchildren and her great-grandchildren, and like kind of how they all connect together. And some of the family is still in Cuba and some has gone to America, and the just juxtaposition of what their life looks like and like the troubles that they face. This is what I wanted Chintu to be, so did I get rid of it? Okay, yeah. I got rid of Chintu, but it is way bigger than this, and it has a very similar structure. So if you like the structure of Chintu, I think you would like this. It begins in the past, and then you kind of see the future, and it's kind of all centering around something happening. This one in 2016, 2018, that one I think 2014. And all culminating to like a connection of all of the characters. I just prefer this a lot more because it was a lot shorter and it packed like a more powerful punch instead of feeling like it was meandering. And this one really focused a lot on all of the women of the family. So I quite enjoyed this one. I would recommend it. I thought the writing was really lyrical and beautiful. There were quotes that I like wanted to keep because I just found them touching and nice, not in a way that it was too sentimental though, and I would recommend this, and I'm really glad that I liked it because it's pretty. Okay, that was all I read that in the month of May. That was not for the Asian Readathon. If you wanted to watch what I liked for the Asian Readathon, that is in another video, which is linked below, but that is all I got. So until next time, happy reading!